Hello, subscribers and others. It's David Hoffman, filmmaker, and I'm going to present a film I just got from Jesse. So you know I collect stories. I'm desperate for stories. And a story to me is something that somebody else experienced and they just share it and put up their cell phone, tripod, and shoot themselves talking. So Jesse is an Australian. He's a young guy. He's a rock and roll guy. He had a band. He's out on the road. And he has this experience with this girl, which when I saw it, I kept on kind of waiting for it to get weirder, and it did. So I want to thank you, Jesse, for sharing this story. By the way, Jesse became a musician, and he's still a musician in Australia, and he's still a young guy. So I hope you enjoy this story. Jesse from Australia.
Hi, I'm Jesse Squire. I'm a musician from Sydney, Australia, and I've been watching David Hoffman's YouTube channel and just seeing all these amazing stories. Mine not being as amazing, yet I still find it quite weird. You know what I mean after I tell it, I guess. So my story begins when I was it was about 7 years ago, and I was touring with my band at the time. We were just four young guys, just basically wanting free beer. We were layabouts, and we were touring with another band who were friends of ours, and we were all together in vans, and I think I owned some feathers and things like that at the time. And, we were meandering through the different towns, heading north, chasing the heat in the summer, like lots of beach towns, that kind of thing. And having a lot of fun. And sort of by the time we had meandered all the way from Sydney to Brisbane, which took a long time, I sort of decided to break off from the band since we didn't have any more gigs for a while and go hitchhiking. So I hitchhiked back south to a place called Byron Bay, which is known throughout Australia as sort of being a sort of hippie sort of area. Although now it's quite commercial, and it was then actually anyway. But so I waltzed into the town and had my guitar, and I was all like, "Hey, musician." There are so many musicians there, and I plan on going busking and sleeping wherever I could, and just living in the moment, man. And I met a girl, and she was really, really lovely. I'm obviously not going to say what her name was, and she we connected. We really connected. We drank some white wine together, and we were having a good time. And she was very different to me. I was sort of a kind of hippie kind of guy. She was sort of like wearing a Playboy shirt, and was interested in that kind of thing. So I talked to her all night. I met her on the beach, and we spoke for a long time all night. And she said, "Well, do you have anywhere to stay?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, do you want to come and stay back at my place?" And I said, "Sure." So we went to her house, and we drank some more wine, and then she went to bed, and I slept on the couch, and and then the next morning, I kind of woke up, and she had breakfast waiting for me, which was really nice. And I thanked her, and I thanked her for letting me stay on the couch. And she said, "You can just stay here if you want. You can stay here for as long as you're in Byron Bay." And I thought, well, this is great. I can go out and busk and not have to worry about a place to stay. Plus, she's also very attractive, and I think we have a chemistry. So, I went out and I'd busk, and she worked at the caravan park, and then I would go back to her place, and we would hang out more, and I think, we'd drink some more, and then I'd go to sleep on the couch, and she'd sleep in her room. And then I think at some point, naturally, I think on the third day of us hanging out, we made love for the first time. And, it was pretty standard stuff, it was just two young people just connecting in that way. I think after about the fourth day, I started to notice some slight quirks in her. Um, she was definitely sort of into, I guess like Wicca or witchcraft, very subtly, and she'd say subtle things about it. And then not so subtly, one night she got a Ouija board out, um, which actually surprised me because again her appearance was very different to what you know in a cliche way would think that somebody into Ouija boards and witchcraft would wear, but looks are always really deceiving, and I was deceived. Um, so I think it was probably the fifth or sixth night she mentioned that she wanted me to stay forever, and she would chain me to the bed so I couldn't leave and feed me. But that's what she wanted. And I thought she was sort of joking, and I laughed it off. And the next day she went to work, and she came back that night, and I'd been busking, and we were at the back of her house, and I hadn't given much of a thought of what she'd said, but we were drinking white wine again. We were sitting in her backyard, and we were just drinking, and I thought I was with a slightly quirky, but otherwise really lovely and amicable woman. And we were drinking the wine, and she looked over at a barbecue, and she said, "Under there is my old cat." And I said, "Oh, he's buried over there, he's passed on." She said, "Yes, he died just a month and a half ago." And I said, "Oh, that's sad. I didn't know you had a cat. You hadn't mentioned it before." And she said, "Yes, I was very sad about it." And I thought, oh, okay, I said sorry, and we started to talk about something else, I think. And then she said, she looked at the barbecue, and then she looked at me, and she said, do you want to dig it up?" And I said, "I beg your pardon?" She said, "Do you want to dig up the cat?" And I was a little shocked. And one thing about me at the time is I would always say yes to everything. I was like a 23-year-old. I was just on that vibe, man. I just would say yes to everything. So I said, sure. And I got a little shovel. She had a little kind of hand shovel, and we moved the barbecue, and I started digging, and there was this sheet in there that I kind of uncovered, and I sort of saw it, and there was the sheet, and she said, sort of in this instructive tone with a hand on my shoulder, she said, "Pick it up." So I picked it up, and I couldn't believe it. I was holding this dead cat, and it had sort of decomposed through the sheet a little bit, but it was still mainly there, it was still a cat. It wasn't just cat bones, and it wasn't like rotted flesh either. It was like a cat. And I sort of parted the sheets to her instruction, and there it was, the cat. And she sort of looked at me, and she was like, "Sway it like it's your son." And I was drunk, I was free, and also I think she must have had this power over me. For some reason I was doing this. I think she's very beautiful, and I found her very drawing, so I think she had some kind of, and I'm not a superstitious person, but she had some kind of spell on me. So I swayed the cat, and she was sort of rubbing my back, and she was saying, "Shh. Shh," just like we were holding our child. It's the only way I could describe it. So we did that for a bit, and I put the cat back at some point, and in the hole, and then she just pulled my clothes off, and we just made love next to this open cat grave. Yeah, and really vigorously, like there was cuts on my back. And so I put the dirt back on the cat, reburied the cat, and put the barbecue back afterwards, and we sort of settled down to everything normally. And then, of course, the next day she got up early to go and work at her job. And I woke up and I'd thought about the things she'd said, and I put a few things together, and I just thought, I've got to go. So I I wrote a note saying thank you for having me, but I left quite abruptly. But that's my story. I think it's one of the strangest things that's ever happened to me. And thank you for listening.